Hello everyone, welcome to another video from GIS Associates. So today we're going to start kind of a new type of video series. I want to do something we're calling Geo Jots. It's an opportunity to discuss various topics that are related to GIS, things like new technologies that are coming out, new software versions, maybe some issues about policy, it could be data management, data sharing, personnel type policies. Skills, different skills you need in GIS. And again, not just technical, but, leadership, management skills, those kind of things. And any other topics that, you might want to suggest. So we'd appreciate it in the comments if there's some topic related to GIS or geospatial technologies that you'd like to see us do a video on or discuss. Feel free to put that down there in the comments so that we can really expand this out. It gives us a chance to look at things maybe a little differently, discuss important issues that may be happening within the industry and so on. So really excited about this new series that we're going to be doing, this Geo Jots. I think it'll really open up things a good bit, maybe bring some things to life. So in this, our inaugural version of Geo Jots, we're going to be talking about GIS and surveying and where's the boundary between those two. And pun was fully intended with that. But this is an ongoing discussion that we've had here in the US about where does GIS stop and surveying begin and vice versa. So we're going to get into that. But before I do that, I want to do a quick update on our contest. As many of y'all know, we've been running a contest to try to get to 2,000 subscribers on the channel. We're very close. We're at just over 1,700 right now. And remember that you can get prizes. When we hit that 2,000 subscriber mark, we're going to be doing some giveaways. They're going to include some of our books like Learning ArcGIS Pro and our ArcGIS Pro 2.x cookbook. And the grand prize winner is going to end up winning a copy of each of those books, as well as a subscription to our e-course bundle for ArcGIS Pro. So make sure you get out there, get subscribed, like the videos, and of course, participate by making those comments in there so you can win. So what I want to do now, I've got a little script here to help keep my brain on what we're talking about. So I want to talk about, again, GIS and surveying, and where does that boundary exist? Where do we cross from doing GIS work to getting into surveying work and vice versa? And this has been a discussion for as long as I can remember, that the understanding of where that is often vague and misleading and leads to some animosity between two what I believe should be complementary professions out there. So what leads to this? Well, first, there's a lot of crossover between what surveyors do and what GIS folks do, right? We do map making, we do field data collection, we do data analysis. So there's a lot of crossover there. And I think because of that, there is obviously some turf war, for lack of a better term, in there. Also, I can speak from talking with GIS professionals is they really don't understand what surveyors do. Okay, they don't understand the effort it takes to do a survey properly. They don't understand the liability that goes along with doing a survey. And vice versa, surveyors don't know what GIS folks really do. In many cases, surveyors think GIS stands for get it surveyed or got information somewhere. So they don't really understand what we do and where we fit into the big picture. And then another thing I think that really hampers the relationship between these two professions is laws. At least here in the US, the laws that define professional surveying are pretty vague and open to different types of interpretation as to when you're practicing surveying and when you're not. So I think that's another issue that causes the problem. And so we're going to talk about that. Of course, now, a lot of y'all are probably going, why should we listen to Tripp? What does Tripp know? What does EGIS Associates know about that? So I'm going to give you a little background about me. For those that may not know me, I've been in the geospatial industry for over 25 years. I have started out my career early on working in the surveying industry. My dad was a licensed surveyor in the state of Georgia here in the United States. And so as soon as I got big enough to go out in the field to carry a bush axe or machete, he took me out there and I worked with him. And so that's where I first really got started in the geospatial field, is doing surveying. I've pulled a chain, I've thrown a chain. And when I say I pulled a chain, I don't just mean 100-foot engineer steel tape. I mean an honest to God linked Gunther's chain. I've done that. I've used plane tables, I've used pole compasses, I've used transits, theodolites, EDMs, electronic distance measures, total stations, and of course modern GPS equipment and all that. So I've had that opportunity to work in the surveying profession. Now I never got licensed. I did go to college to be a surveyor. So I went there, took survey law and intro to surveying, route surveying, all of that stuff. So I went to school to be a surveyor. I didn't go to school to be a GIS person. So, I've had that experience. And it wasn't until, I guess, the late 90s that I transitioned out of surveying with a brief stop into IT, but from surveying into GIS. And I started working there. Of course, I've been there pretty much ever since. But what I have found is that my experience as a surveyor, again, non-licensed, but working in the surveying field, was extremely beneficial to my GIS career. It gave me a very strong foundational understanding of things like coordinates, elevations, data accuracy, field data collection techniques, and so on. So I find that these two are really complementary, and I don't really understand why we're fighting with each other, honestly, because I think working together, we're much better off than if we're fighting one another. So let's kind of take this and talk a little bit about why we have some of the problems. And I've already mentioned these. I think part of the initial issue is that there is overlap between GIS and surveying. We do both go out and do field data collection. Now, it usually is for different purposes. I'm going to go out as a GIS person and maybe map the location of nesting sites of a species, or track the location of food banks or shelters for various plans or analysis. Whereas if I'm a surveyor, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do collection on location of property pins that we find. Maybe doing a topo of a site for engineering design purposes. Going out and doing cross sections along the road, again, for engineering design work. I'm going to analyze that data to figure out what level of closure, how accurate was my field data collected. I'm going to then put those pieces together and form, if I'm dealing with parcels, some sort of opinion on where the boundary of that parcel is, utilizing that data. So there's definitely some overlap there, but there's also a lot of separation. For example, in the GIS, I'm going to be building databases that help cover large areas, not just single projects, but entire cities, counties, states, or countries for that matter. I'm then going to be consolidating data from multiple sources, whereas surveyors tend to work primarily with their data. They're not taking other data sources compiled. They may use those as initial reference points, but they're going to field verify most of that. GIS folks don't always do that. We're going to be in the GIS side building web and mobile applications to utilize data to put it in the hands of others. Again, not typically in the realm of surveying. So we've got some definite areas of overlap. We definitely have some different areas where we're separate, where we don't perform the same things. And I think generally speaking, when we start looking at where the boundary is between GIS and surveying, that we have some common ground. I think that in generally, most cases, we're going to say that collection of data for the uses of design, for engineers, for example, or architects, whatnot, that would certainly be in the realm of surveying. I don't believe any GIS person would question that, because it has a whole different level of liability and accuracy needs that have to be met there that's not typically done within the GIS realm. Also believe that anything dealing with boundary location of parcels or other land ownership, for the sake of delivering that opinion on where those boundaries are to decide that this person or group owns this specific piece of land or has this specific rights to that. And by that I mean they could have an easement for access, an access easement, or mineral rights or things of that nature. That would definitely be in the realm of surveying. That's, again, not something most GIS people want to get involved in because of the level of liability that gets associated with that. Okay, so I think in general we can agree that those things fall definitely in the realm of surveying. At least from my point of view, I don't believe anybody I've ever talked to in the GIS industry would question that. That's just not stuff we want to do. And there's certain things that I think are definitely in the realm of GIS that most surveyors would not disagree with. Talking about creating applications that allow access to data via the web or mobile devices, I don't know of too many surveyors that want to get into that realm and would not question that would be GIS. I believe that the development of data and maps and even analysis that deal with things that are not associated with construction, engineering design, property ownership, or anything is probably in question. So if I'm, for example, creating data to track the migration patterns of a certain species or a disease, that I don't think most surveyors would claim that surveying. I don't think they'd want to be involved in that. So I think we're, on that we would be in a agreement. I think that the gray area comes in where we start seeing things like if I'm going out and trying to locate utility structures, for example. So if I'm going out to locate fire hydrants, that's when we start to get into that area of disagreement. Is that surveying or is that, GIS? And if it can be both, then where do we define that switch? When do we go from GIS to surveying? If it's okay for GIS to locate fire hydrants to some point, but not all points, where is that dividing line? And that's really where I think the question, it doesn't have to just be the collection of like utility data. The other thing now with drones coming up is pretty much anybody can go put up a drone and capture aerial photography and start extracting data from that. And some drones now have LiDAR units trapped to them. So again, is that surveying or not? And this is where we start to get into that rub, is where is that boundary at? And I think contributing to that rub is the fact that the laws, at least here in the United States, I can't speak to other countries specifically, but the laws here in the United States are very general in their description of what defines the practice of surveying. And I'll give you some examples in a moment. But that's compounded by the fact that each individual state here in the United States makes its own definition of what surveying is within its laws. So I live here in Georgia, so what the state of Georgia defines as the practice of surveying is not necessarily the same as Alabama, Washington, Ohio, California, Maine, New York, and so on. Each state is, individually gets to make that decision, which I think also further causes a rub, because if I go from one state to another as a GIS person, I'm not accustomed to having to deal with different law. GIS is GIS as far as most folks are concerned, and that causes issues as well as just the vagueness. Now, one of the things we do have here in the States is the NCEES, which stands for, and I got to read my screen here, the National Council for Examiners for Engineering and Surveying. Now, this is the group that really makes the exams for getting your professional license in either engineering or surveying. And they've also developed some model laws and rules that states can choose, if they so desire, to use as kind of a template for their own laws and rules of conduct that define the practice of surveying and engineering. Now, some states loosely follow these, some states ignore them altogether, and it is very hit or miss. Okay, so to give you some examples of kind of the vagueness here, I've got a couple of states here, and I'll try to remember to put the text on the screen as I'm going through this so you can read it. But For example, Colorado defines professional land surveying to include the preparation of boundary control points, preparation of the boundary control portions of geographic information systems. Okay, so anything that shows boundary control, which would be parcel boundaries, but that could also include city-county boundaries, voting district boundaries, school district boundaries. I mean, any of those are boundaries, right? So in a GIS, but do surveyors want to get involved in the delineation of all of those? I think not. And if you're just drawing it for general reference, again, do you need to be a surveyor? Georgia, where I live, says the definition of land surveying includes the utilization of measurement devices or systems such as aerial photography, geodetic positioning systems, land information systems, or similar technology for the evaluation or location of property, easement, or right-of-way boundaries. Okay? So again, if you're going out and just say creating a tax map for a county, we're just showing rough ideas where parcel boundaries are, according to this, that could be surveying without a license. Maryland says the practice of land surveying includes utilizing measurement devices or systems such as aerial photography, global positioning systems, geographic information systems for the location of boundaries. Again, so if I'm in a GIS and I'm showing the location of parcel boundaries, city boundaries, county boundaries, township boundaries, whatever it is, technically that's surveying. The way this is read. Now, I will add that Maryland currently has a caveat in their law that has if they include a disclaimer on any of the products produced out of a GIS that basically says, and they have specific warning, but in general it says something like, this is for general reference only, does not constitute a land survey or so forth, so on, then it's okay. But again, the reading of the law here is still somewhat confusing. And this is just a small sample. If you go out and review the definition of survey for all the other states here in the United States, you'll see that they're very similar to this, that they have some very vague recollections very vague specifications, I should say, about what defines surveying. And I think that's part of the rub. And then there's other things that go into this. From the surveying side of things, the use of their services has been slowly eroded over time because, one, people don't understand what they do and the value of a survey. I can speak to my own sister who bought her house. And even though her father, who was a licensed surveyor, and her brother, who had worked in that industry, encouraged her to get a survey, chose not to because it wasn't required in order to close on the house. Later, she found out she had a drainage easement on her property that prevented her from doing some landscaping and things that she wanted to do. That would have been found on a survey, but she didn't bother. She didn't want to pay the $2,000, $3,000 it was for that. She just didn't see the value, even though we were trying to explain it to her. So I think that's part of it too. The surveyors are worried, trying to make sure that their services are valued. And then I think we also get the idea within surveyors themselves is that they have some. If I call one surveyor and ask for a price on a project, I can call another surveyor, tell them what the first surveyor told me was a price, and then that second surveyor will often cut the price down. And then I call back to the first surveyor and say, hey, this other surveyor said they do it for less, and then you'll cut your own price down. So I think that kind of behavior, which is fairly common in the survey industry, is undervalues or undercuts the value of the services surveyors provide. And I think they provide very valuable services. So there's a lot that seems to be causing this rub. And this is just a very short discussion on this. I actually did a couple of years ago a full day workshop on this up in Ohio at their state GIS and Surveying conference. Myself and I can't remember the name of the other gentleman who was the surveyor there representing them. I represented GIS, he represented surveying. We had about a 50-50 mix. We spent all day talking about this stuff, so I'm just quickly covering this. So where do I think the boundary should be? As somebody that has had a foot in both of those industries, where do I personally believe should be that dividing line between them? Well, I definitely agree about anything done for design and engineering work should be done by a surveyor. Any works created for the purpose of property ownership delineation or rights delineation should be done by a surveyor. Where we get into the gray areas, for example, like locating the fire hydrant, I really think it gets down to the purpose. If I'm just going out to get an inventory of how many fire hydrants I have and on my system and roughly where they're at, I don't have to get them, super accurate. I just need roughly where they're at. Then I think you shouldn't have to be a surveyor to do that. If I'm going out and just doing an inventory of street signs, again, I don't think I need to be a surveyor for that. If, however, I'm going to go out and locate that fire hydrant for the sake of creating an engineering model to model the flows in that system, then sure, I think that should be done by a surveyor, because that's, again, their realm. That's kind of getting the engineering thing. But really what that boils down to is accuracy, right? If I have to go out and collect data and guarantee a certain level of accuracy, and personally, I don't care if that's a 1 centimeter level accuracy or a 1 mile level of accuracy. I think if we have to guarantee a certain specific level of accuracy has been achieved with the data we are delivering, the maps that we are presenting, then that is the realm of a surveyor. Because folks here in GIS, most of us, at least here in the US, are not taught how to calculate error, how to adjust for error, and how to really set up and know that we're achieving that defined level of accuracy, be whatever it is. Like I said, I don't care if it's a centimeter or if it's a mile, but if we're having to guarantee, if we're having to put on our documents, on our deliverables, that this data is accurate to within a centimeter or within a foot or whatever it is, or some ratio. That's another way we can define, 1 foot in 10,000 feet, whatever. Surveyors, we do that all the time. That's the realm of surveyors. Again, GIS folks, we are not trained, generally speaking, in how to do that. Which is why some things scare the bejesus out of me in GIS, where I see, talking about ArcGIS, you could do compass rule adjustments to parcel data in the old Arc map and even old Arc info. You talk to a GIS person, what is a compass rule adjustment? And they have no idea, but they can hit the button and do it. You get in the new parcel fabric and you can do a least squares adjustment to that parcel data. And again, GIS people don't really know what the heck that is. Whereas in the survey world, we're taught those things. We understand what types of corrections are best based on the type of data we collected, the type of instruments we've used, and what the expectation of accuracy is. We know those kind of things. So I think anytime we're in that realm where guaranteed accuracy must be achieved, then that's a surveyor. Again, for GIS people, we can go out and collect all kinds of things for general inventory, and I think it would be well within the scope of the practice of GIS to even say the methods we use to collect this should have achieved a certain level of accuracy. However, we do not guarantee it. Right? You cannot put a guarantee on that. That's the surveyor. So that's my thoughts on the matter. I would love to see what you all have to say on this. There's still a lot of discussion. I know that URISA, the Urban and Regional Information Systems Association, has been heavily involved in this with several states here in the U.S., representing the side of the GIS professional. They've actually written a white paper on the topic, which I'll try to include in the link. And then, of course, representing the surveyors, the individual state surveying societies have been in there doing that, as well as an organization called MAPS and some others representing the surveyor side of this. So, if it was easy, we'd have it all figured out yet, but apparently we don't. So, but I'd love to hear your comments. And again, try to keep it civil. We're not out here to try to cause any further animosity. We just want to get really figure that out. Because again, I think the two working together is much better. We can really build both professions, increase the understanding of what we do, and really bring value to what we do and who we do it for, which is ultimately the most important. Those people we serve. I mean, the reason they set up surveying licensing, I should say, was to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. Well, in GIS, I think we have similar goals. We don't want to see anybody hurt by what we do. And I think, again, by working together, we can make sure we get the best of both worlds and both professions can prosper as a result of that. So anyway, there's my 2 cents on it. I'm sure y'all have comments, so do leave those along in the bottom. Don't forget, if you have ideas for other topics to discuss with our new Geo Jots series, please put those down there as well. We'd love to hear from you. So with that, I guess I'll call it a day, or call it a video, I should say. We appreciate you watching. Please remember to like the video if you did. Dislike it if you don't. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can get involved into our contest, and keep on watching. So we'll see you next time.